Laila, welcome to Tunisia.
Thank you, Ziad.
Can you first introduce yourself to our audience? Who is Laila Atshan?
Laila Atshan is a Palestinian Arab global woman, psychologist. I'm blind. I've worked a lot with trauma and refugees and displaced, and I love life.
So you're from Palestine.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about the part of Palestine you come from, your upbringing, and how you ended up in Harvard?
I was born to a refugee family. My family was a refugee family from 1948, a village called Al Haditha, but was born and raised in Ramallah. I went to a boarding school in Jerusalem, an English boarding school. The only way I was able to be educated is to be in a boarding school, which was sad and privileged because otherwise I wouldn't have been here. How I came to Harvard is I was encouraged by a relative of mine, Laila Atshan, who's still a Harvard doctoral student, to leave. He said, it's time for you to take a break from trauma work and go talk to another audience. And actually, the kind of audience I went and studied with at Harvard were potential government people, army men, business people. It's the opposite of who I deal with in my daily life. I jokingly and half seriously told them I usually deal with their victims, and now I'm dealing with the perpetrators, hopefully to influence them a bit.
And how was that experience useful to you? Because you obviously deal with trauma, as you said, and with the victims of those perpetrators. But did you feel there was what was the added value of this experience?
It was empowering for me because the things I wasn't sure I can do, it got confirmed to me that as a blind person, when you get the right support, you can do just about anything. And even though I knew I could do a lot, but I secretly wasn't sure of certain things in my life. That's for one thing on a personal level. It was empowering. And shortly after being at Harvard, even though I'm not a politician, I was nominated and voted for to be in the student government in Kennedy School, Harvard University. And I think for me it was also useful to be the voice of the voiceless at a place like Harvard, at the Kennedy School. Because I think when we hear people's issues and challenges and suffering, we do have a responsibility to bridge the voices to those who might be in power one day. So I think this was, to me, my biggest achievement, really.
How is the Arab presence in Harvard compared to the influence of other maybe communities, I would say?
It's less than other communities, but last year when I was there, it was... I was proud of the kind of presence we had because there was a positive presence and a vocal presence, if you wish. So it was a unique year in that sense.
To go back to the Palestinian issue and work also that you are doing right now, I believe you also were part of discussions that involved different parties who are actually stakeholders in the conflict right now. Can you tell us a little bit about that discussion?
In Palestine with different parties? Yeah. I'm always trying to bridge voices, if you wish, and to bridge point of views. I'm someone for connectedness and not for divide. So I try to remind people of their responsibility when we're talking, and that positions are actually not a prestige, they are a responsibility for looking and listening at the smallest person they think is, if you wish.
So do you feel that there is still hope, I would say, when people would continue talking, even if we're not seeing any tangible achievement on the ground?
I think there's always hope, because as long as there's life, there's hope. And I see hope in young people. And that's, for me, people going to places like Harvard is very important because you feel equal to the rest of the world. Because, you know, as Mo Ibrahim was just saying, it seems like we were really made to feel like obedient students who are being preached and lectured and preached. And I think when you're at a place like Harvard and such places, you feel equal and empowered to be the change. So yes, of course there's hope.
How is the situation right now in Palestine?
In Palestine, it's not the easiest as long as there's checkpoints and barriers to market and to mobility and to recreation, which is the case in Palestine. It's a problem, but even though it's the case, people are always having initiatives of hopes. Even behind checkpoints, there's initiative of hopes. Ramallah is an amazing place where there's music, theater, and culture all the time happening, which and we attract so many internationals who really want to leave everything they have and just be a part of this. There's a life, there's a spirit there.
In Tunisia, we had a revolution 2 years ago. I guess as every Arab or even world citizen, you followed what was happening or what we call now the Arab Spring. Can you give me first what was your initial response to what was happening and unfolding in Tunisia and Egypt?
My initial response change is always good, but it's how we react to what happened is what's important, how we respond to it. It can be a spring and it can be a long winter. And my wish for anyone who feels the sense of cause and leadership in them to jump on board and pull it to being a spring. It's a vulnerable time for the Arab world in general, I think, now, because change is always, you know, when a body goes through an operation, it's a vulnerable time. But it's how you treat with post-operation is how the body heals. And I think now is the time to really cultivate, to invest in the revolution to make it a spring and to not be hijacked by dark-aged people.
You're now based in Beirut, and I guess you're on the first row to observe what's happening in Syria. What's your feeling about that?
It makes me sad. It's a puzzle to me. In a way, I try to look, because I see every problem has something good in it. It's a change, but again, the process of change is costing so many lives and so much suffering and so much loss of dignity for so many people that I have actually observed. You know, it just really hurts me to see an old woman sobbing, begging for a mattress to sleep on, who's sleeping in the graveyard, or a 4-year-old child whose hair turned to gray at such an early age. But there's always hope. In the midst of my interviews, I met a 14-year-old Palestinian boy whose family is second-time refugees. And he was smiling and caring and compassionate. And I said, Mahran, where do you bring your smile and hope from? He said, it's from within me. It's from within my life, because it doesn't come from out. If I just waited for out, I'll collapse. It's in me, and I have to keep looking inside of myself to get the hope. So this kind of a child truly gives me hope.
But in the same time, we're seeing millions of refugees now, and the amount of trauma with the use of guns and this such a big violence that's happening. Do you feel we can get back on our feet after this kind of big trauma?
Throughout history, there's always been, unfortunately, these issues. The addition now is the technology of weapons that's dangerous. And healing is always possible. We just have to be conscious of the importance of healing and creating survivors and not victims. Victims who are helpless, who are just waiting helplessly for help. We need to create survivors who can make the change, who can be the change. It's worrying, of course, but I'm not going to give up into this worry, even though I cry every day after leaving people and their problems in the camps in Lebanon.
As a Harvard alumnus, uh, your voice is heard in the United States, and now more than ever, we kind of feel the need to influence this policy because of all what's happening in the region. Especially like today, President Obama is in the West Bank and is visiting Palestine. What message you would like to convey to the American administration about Palestine and about the region in general?
My message to American leaders is to have more of a solid conscience towards our part of the world, and the bad they spread here will go against them. It reminds me of a story I read once about a farmer who was taking care of his neighbor's field, and someone said, "Why don't you just take care of your own field? Why do you have to bother about his neighbor?" And the farmer said, "Because if his field is doing good, mine is doing good too." So I think the United States cannot have a blind eye to what they're also taking part in our part of the region, and the division they're kind of encouraging in our region.
You are today celebrated in Tunis for an award that was given to really famous Harvard alumnus, and you're the first woman to have this prize. Can you tell us a little bit more about your feeling around this recognition?
I feel grateful, and I feel wonderful that finally other voices that have nothing to do with wealth or power or male dominance will be heard, and it gives me hope that there's chance for others also to be heard. Coincidentally, I had on my bed in the hotel something I may have here. It's something from Confucius that says, moving a mountain starts with small steps. So I feel this is my hope for small steps being taken.
You're giving a talk tonight, and a lot of people would like to attend it, but they can't. Can you give us a glimpse of what you're going to say tonight?
My main focus of my talk will be around crisis can either be a danger of an opportunity, and how can we in the region, how can anyone with responsibility, again, leadership and a conscience, step in and make it into an opportunity. And I will address it from three angles: my personal life, my work life, and my forward dream for the region.
You're in Tunisia for the first time, Laila. Tell us what's your feeling around this.
I'm seriously nostalgic and touched by being Tunisia. There's the kind of acceptance, a kindness, and just natural wisdom that I've experienced in the last 24 hours from the simplest people is amazing. And it actually saddens me, because I say, if we're not short of all that, what are we short of? Why, who's going to take all these resources and employ them in the right place? And they are here, even in one hotel. I haven't been much, to other places, and I feel nostalgic.